welcome, and I'm sure that some more people will be joining us, but this is the August 4th, 7 o'clock Town Hall with John Haschak. This is sponsored by and hosted by Willits Economic Localization, and we welcome anybody who would like to support our organization. We run on a small shoestring with all volunteers, and we try to get Willits and the area around Willits to be as economically self-sufficient as possible, which includes local food, conserving energy and water, healthcare, environmental health of our community, entrepreneurs. So we're kind of a clearinghouse and an umbrella for anything that helps our community thrive. John Haschak, of course, is our 3rd district supervisor, and he was just reelected to a second 4-year term. And we've been really, really grateful to have him representing us, because he's very responsive and very aware of issues and wants to hear from people. So that's why we've been doing these town halls by Zoom pretty much ever since the pandemic, and we probably will go back to in person when the situation enables that. Why don't we have John start out with his introduction, and then we'll go to questions and comments from the audience.
John? All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here, and really thanks to Madge and for putting this on. Madge has a 5-year-old newborn grandchild, Owen, and so she's
5-day-old.
Did I say 5-year?
Yeah.
Okay, 5-day-old. And so she's doing double duty and helping out. And so really appreciate her taking time away from that part of life and trying to do this. And thanks to KMUD Radio for broadcasting this too. So hopefully, I'm seeing people from around the county and certainly the 3rd district. So thank you for coming on this evening. And so hopefully we'll have time for lots of good discussion, and let's go to it. So I wanted to thank everyone for re-electing me to this position. It's truly an honor, and I appreciate the vote of confidence. And so hopefully in the next 4 years, we'll be able to do some good things for the 3rd district and Mendocino County. I have 4 things I wanted to talk about right now, and I'll just be brief on all of them. We started a tree mortality task force, and so we just had our first meeting last Friday. We had an expert from UC Cooperative Extension, who's a forester, Michael Jones, and he was talking about the issues of tree mortality, and this kind of started with a collaboration I've been doing with Supervisor Pisca from Lake County and Supervisor Dillon from Napa County. And they've been hit harder than we have so far with this tree mortality. But according to the expert, it's certainly coming our way. We can see the amount of dead trees, and we're just at the beginning of it. So this task force is really looking at how do we coordinate activities, make sure that the CAL FIRE and the Office of Emergency Services and everyone are kind of communicating and collaborating on, how we deal with it. So we'll see what happens for the future, but we will probably have another meeting in October, and probably every 2 months to get that up and running. Let's see. We're the tax issue that the board approved putting on a tax for the November ballot. And if we look at the tax right now, we're paying 5/8 of a cent tax for Measure A, which is 1/8 of a cent, which is a library tax. And then Measure B, which is a mental health tax, and we're paying 4/8 of a cent. So together that's 5/8. So the Friends of the Libraries have put together they collected enough signatures to get their tax increase on the ballot. but it's really going from 1/8 to 2/8 of a cent because they have a lot of operational and capital improvement costs. So they've gotten enough signatures to get that on the ballot. So that would be 2/8 of a cent. And the measure B, mental health, is going down from 4/8 down to 1/8 of a cent. And so that would be, 2/8. If the library passes, that's 2/8. Measure B would be 1/8. And so to keep the tax from going up any more than it is, then we would have 2/8. And so we've gotten it down to where the board is putting on the ballot 2/8 of a tax, and 90% of that would go to fire districts, and then 10% would go to countywide fire resiliency things, such as what the Mendocino Fire Safe Council is doing. It would be looking at home hardening, it would be prescriptive burning, it would be chipper days, and defensible space issues. And so really that tax would generate about $4 million a year. And if we did that, 90% of it would be spread among the fire districts, and then 10%, which would be about 400,000, would go to this community-wide fire resiliency issues, such as what we just talked about. And then water extraction, the big issue has been, with the drought and everything, that people have been drilling wells in the valley floors, such as in Round Valley or Redwood Valley, different places throughout the county. Then they extract the water and they're selling the water and hauling it off into the hills, most of the time for illegal cannabis grows. And so what we proposed and the board approved on a 4-to-1 vote was to regulate that. And what it would do is make sure that if you're getting a permit to sell water, then you would have to prove that it's sustainable and it wouldn't negatively impact your neighbors. And also we have some minor restrictions on water hauling because that was more problematic in getting that in effect. So really the board approved it to send it to county council to get their legal interpretation or analysis of it, and then to the planning commission to get their take. So that's where we are with that water extraction proposed ordinance. And then lastly, the budget. And we've certainly had some issues with the budget lately. The healthcare came in about in the last couple of years over $7 million that wasn't accounted for. So, we've had a lot of increased experience. It's a self-funded healthcare plan. And so we're just looking at different models. We're looking at getting out from being self-funded and going with a bigger group. And so we're trying to save money in whatever way possible, but there seems to be some issues with the communication between the auditor's office and the executive office with the CEO. And so we're, I think that we really need to just sit down and have a deep conversation about what is really going on, have the whole board, a whole day of workshops on, how people see the budget. Because if we have different people saying different things about the budget, then it really is problematic. And it's very difficult to negotiate and do all those other things because we don't have any numbers that we can really count on. So hopefully we will all be able to sit down, do like a day workshop and just have everyone put the numbers that they have and try to figure out where the issues are. So with that, I'm up for questions or however you want to do it, Madge.
Thank you for that introduction. Maybe that spurred some ideas for questions, and some people came with their questions already in mind. So we basically open the floor up, and you can, I'm going to put it on for me anyway, on gallery view so I can see if someone is raising their hand, or you can use the little raise your hand icon that's down at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you have that. I guess I'm going to start with one while you're thinking about them there. You mentioned getting accurate information from the auditor and from the treasurer. How is that? Is it already being implemented? The combination of the four different titles in one person. How is that functioning? Auditor,
Yeah,
controller, treasurer, tax collector.
yeah, in the when was it? Early spring, maybe February or so, that the board voted to consolidate the treasurer, tax collector, and the auditor controller's offices. I was the dissenting vote on it. But so we went ahead and we did it. And, what happened was that the treasurer, Sherry Schapmeyer, who's been with the county for about 40 years, quit because she didn't feel like the board was listening to her. And the auditor also was against this proposal, but that's Shamise Covison, who was the acting auditor at the time. And so what we just did was, because Shamise Covison had come to the board and said, look, if we're going, she won the election. So it was on the ballot. She was the only person who ran. She won. And so she said, since I'm going to take this position, and normally it wouldn't happen until January, because there's this whole flux, and instead of being caught in this limbo, she might as well be the combined treasurer, tax collector, auditor, controller. And so the board approved moving ahead and naming her as that combined position, to give her the power to be able to make the changes and not be in this kind of limbo stage. So we're dealing with that. We gave her the power that would have been hers in January.
Well, I'm sure it's a challenging position, especially when you have budget crunches. So I see, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Labus? Your hand,
Labus.
great.
My question is, well, first comment right off the bat is, John, you've been bullied and I don't agree with it. Just because you disagree doesn't mean you're wrong. And I think from my perspective, John, you are representing our district well. You're also representing labor well. Every labor person I've spoken with has said, you know what, Haschak has our back. So I've worked for the county now since 1997. One of the biggest things is, I remember in 08 and 09, when everybody took pay cuts. And for me and my family, and my wife works for the school district and I work for the county, it was 25% pay cut to our family. We are just now climbing out of that. So now when we're going into labor negotiations, nobody knows what's really going on with the budget. And it is frustrating for people like me who have worked for the county for God knows how many years. And we have to worry about, are we going to have cuts again? The fact that SEIU was only offered $3,000 bonus after working all the way through COVID and dealing with COVID positive people, dealing with everything. Currently, my position is a non-general fund. It would not cost county money to give non-general fund people a raise. So when I sit back and go, all right, it was like today, I went out and dealt with a hoarder house and hostility and all these other issues. But when I look at it in the big picture and I see people paid as much as a McDonald's worker, In-N-Out, Taco Bell, and we expect you to go deal with this. I have a very hard time with it. And I'm not blasting you, John, because I'm going to tell you right now, John, you are the most labor friendly guy there is. And I voted for you. But I have a very hard time with sticking with the old school. If nobody gets a raise, we're not going to give everybody a raise, even though we can give other people raises. And I have a very hard time with that. And knowing that I watch, and I work for social services, and I watch people, and we look at the announcements every week, and we lose more people than we gain. When is the board going to go, I need to take care of these people? And we need to make sure, because let's be real, what does social services help? The needy people.
Yeah,
but we're not seeing that happen.
Let's make
All
sure
right,
we have time for John's response here. This is a tough question.
Curtis.
Oh, and then Jennifer after that. Okay.
Okay. Curtis, I really, I hear where you're coming from and really appreciate you hanging in there with the county through the thick and thin. You know, what Curtis is talking about is, you know, if social services, a lot of those people, it's not paid by the general fund, it's state reimbursed monies. And so if we can increase those wages, then, you know, it doesn't really affect the general fund. So it's certainly been discussed in negotiations, and I hope we can come, you know, that's about all I can say about that, but I hope that we can come to a resolution very quickly, because with 9% inflation, you know, the hard times with the inflation that's going on, housing that's up, all of those issues that we've been dealing with COVID and all, you know, it's been for people working in the social services and throughout the county workforce, it's a huge demands on people. And, you know, we're trying to treat them right. You know, I've been very proud that, you know, for the last 4 years, we were on a plan to get people up to, you know, the comparables to market rate for most of the county workers. But then with this latest budget crisis we're in, we're going to lose a lot if we don't find the money quickly. You know, we're going to lose people. We're going to lose that standing that when we are getting to the comparables, we're going to fall behind, because others, you know, our neighboring counties and other jurisdictions they're going forward with their, you know, COLAs and everything else. And if we can't keep up with that, then we fall behind. And I don't want to see that happen. And thank you, Curtis, for your comments. You know, I certainly, my background as a president of the Teachers Association, I understand the need for COLA and people who don't work for much money.
Thank you. I appreciate you 100%.
Thank you, Curtis.
I was telling Jennifer to unmute herself, and I forgot to unmute me. Okay, Jennifer, it's your turn.
Hi. Curtis and I met because of union stuff and negotiations way back when. I worked with the agency here for about 24 years. I was on the negotiating team. I knew where the money was coming from that supports us, and very small percentage of county funds goes, because I worked with Child Protective Services, and the majority, very high majority of our money comes from state and federal monies. And yet they still took our pay. They didn't give us COLAs. And this all happened under Carmel's regime. And the money, the agents or the county at that point had the ability to use a certain percentage of the monies we brought in for other things. And it's like Curtis was saying, it feels terrible when people leave. It's when I go to the store and I find out that cashiers at Safeway were earning more than I was after 20 some odd years as a social worker in the court unit with a master's degree, not in social work, but in cultural anthropology, which is now accepted by the state. It makes you feel terrible. And you don't get people's goodwill and you don't get the work out of them. So I'm just trying to explain where it came from. And anything that can be done now to make it different would really go a long way. I know that from what I've heard of people that I've been working with in the past, they're hurting badly and they don't have enough workers. And the fear is that something really tragic could happen because we don't have enough people. So anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for those comments too. That, it just shows what, a lot of the county jobs are very critical for people's well-being. Whether it's law enforcement or social services, a lot of people are depending on these critical services for our welfare. And when we can't provide that service or people are leaving because they're paying more in Sonoma County or other places, it's not good.
Do you have any comment about how that plays out politically with the board? Are there particular arguments that other board members are responsive to? I mean, obviously you're an advocate.
Well, it all has to do with negotiations, so I probably shouldn't comment on what other people say or anything like that. So,
well,
sorry about that.
That's okay, but it's a political process. So John is 1 out of 5 votes. We need to get at least 3. So.
Well, and we also need to get a handle on the finances too and figure out really where we are, because it's not fair for anyone to.
All right, well, I'm gonna open this back up again. Also, I just want to mention, I put into the chat how you can support WELL, that is sponsoring this town hall. And if you're in the Willits greater area, we appreciate all the memberships and support we can get. Well, we've heard about the labor situation, and that's part of the budget situation.
Hey, Tommy.
Okay. To say something.
All right, great.
But in this case, I really want to thank John for supporting the quarter-cent sales tax for our fire service providers and for fire prevention throughout this county. That's going to help 21 first responding agencies that, just as the social service people were talking about, have had to respond to the pandemic and all its impacts. But since 5 years ago, we formed an association of the fire district electeds, the directors, representing all these districts to back up the Fire Chiefs Association. And in that period of time of the last 5 years, the board has had fire ad hocs assigned to negotiate with the 2 associations. So it's been a long way to get to a 5-0 vote for a quarter-cent sales tax, but I really have to thank you, John. You came aboard. You were never part of these negotiations. So in a sense, it blindsided you. You didn't see it coming probably, but you certainly got on board when it was necessary. And now it's up to the voters. And I think fire is on everybody's mind. Our association of the directors throughout the county came about after we lost a frontline engine in the Redwood Valley fire in 2017. And it was a brand new engine that got lost. These engines cost $500,000. Right now, it's a multi-year waiting just to get a new engine or a replacement engine. Many of us are currently getting used CAL FIRE wildland engines, which we're very thankful for. And we're of course putting money into those, but it's still a tremendous cost savings. But an example of where this money will go in the future is both Willits and Brook Trails have had to add hired personnel to be able to respond with what's required during the 9 to 5 work week. It's just a volunteer run system that provides as many man hours as the sheriff's department that is paid throughout the county really needs this kind of funding to come in. And it's not just the sales tax. The supervisors have supported other ways to help out the fire districts throughout the county. And you've been a part of that. And I just really want to extend a thank you.
Well, yeah, we have been able to, dedicate a lot of the PG&E money to fire safety and fire districts. And then we also had the TOT, the transient occupancy tax for private campgrounds that got dedicated to, the people voted to dedicate it to the fire districts. So we have been making progress, but there's still a lot more that can be done. And I think this quarter-cent tax would be, if we passed it and the library tax, then there will not be an increase to that 5/8 that we're already paying.
Lauren?
Sorry about that. I'm supposed to be an engineer at this sort of thing, but too many buttons. John, I have sent some questions to you in the direct chat. Did you see those?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I will ask them out loud. First, I have 3 questions here to start with. What is going on with the county's cannabis program and the edits for Cannabis Equity Grant Program Manual?
Okay, I've been working on the cannabis program, the equity grant, and the equity grant was $3 million we got from the state to help people who've been harmed by the war on drugs. So really what we're trying to do is streamline it so that if you qualify and you have something that the state allows, then we just approve it. Because a lot, from my point of view, we've got a big picture of trying to get people to their state annual license, by July 1st of 2023. And, the equity grant is kind of almost a side issue. And so, we need to make that as easy as possible for people and to allow what we can. And so we've been working on it. And there's also, we had to make sure that there was no misuse. What if a person happened to get the grant money, $50,000, and went to, didn't spend it the way they were supposed to? Then what's the liability for the county? And so we worked that out. And with county council, I had to call up the director of cannabis control in Sacramento and talk to her to get some clarification on it. We got that. And so we should be moving those grants through because we have to spend $3 million of that grant money by the end of August. So hopefully that's moving, and the grant program manual will be updated to be, allow what the state allows. And then the second question was, can you describe in detail the county's current financial crisis? What's at risk if it's not sorted out? It's not sorted. And so, what I know is, 2 years ago, the health plan, we were informed that we were 1.5 million in the hole. And then all of a sudden it became 3.6 million. And so there was like a lack of communication between the auditor's office and the CEO's office. And then this past year, we were 4 million in the hole from the health plan. So we can use ARPA money, the American Rescue Plan Act money, to help cover that budget hole. But, we need to figure out what our options are with the health plan. And, moving forward, we just can't go on losing 4 million a year. So we're looking at other health plans. And like I said, increasing the pool, going away from being self-funded to a bigger pool. And then the third question, the old toxic dump outside of Laytonville is affecting families in the Caddo tribe. Are you looking at any solutions? Yeah, we've had a couple meetings I've had with people who are looking into that. And then they spoke at the MAC, the Laytonville Area Municipal Advisory Council meeting last week, explained what they were seeing. And then we also had other points of view about what the tests have shown. And so we're looking at those issues, and I just set up a meeting for in another week to talk to the people with Supervisor Jurdy, because he's interested too in working on these issues. So we're going to keep talking and trying to figure it out. In the meantime, the county is planning on doing an extra cap over the landfill. And so Howard DeShield, the Director of Transportation, who runs the solid waste, or the landfill issues, he's going to be up in Laytonville, I think the end of September or early October, and talk to the community about what the plan is to recap the landfill. So we're looking at a lot of things, do we need to test some more? Do we need to, and the people certainly need to get the information about what the county is up to.
Thank you. I'll type a direct message to you if we get any more questions.
And I see John Almeida's hand is up. So John, you have the floor.
Yeah. So I've been gone for a couple of weeks, and I know that the city of Willits had a meeting a while back. I believe it was kind of like an ad hoc meeting. I haven't got any information. Maybe Madge, you can give us a little bit of information on that. And I don't know if the results have went to a full city council meeting. And then I'd also like to find out if John, if you have any input on that. And after that, I have a follow-up question. So if you can report on that, I'd appreciate it.
I'll start with the question about the city. It's the Water and Wastewater Committee is a standing committee. They had a committee meeting, and there were several people in the public there. I'm not allowed to attend because only 2 council members can be there. So I wasn't able to attend the actual meeting. That committee reported to the next city council, which was just a week ago, Wednesday. And they basically did not, to my satisfaction, clarify the policy that I had been raising ever since April. But I'll try to very briefly explain that, the city had moved ahead many years ago during a drought emergency with developing our groundwater well at the Elias well. And then the State Water Resources Board gave us permission to use that well, not just for emergencies, but for regular usage. And then this April, there was a proposal to improve some of the pump and the piping, and adding a water clarifier holding tank. And so there was an environmental document for that. 2 out of the 5 of us council members didn't feel that it was quite adequate in addressing how much we would use that groundwater well. And the staff proposed a operational use plan that appeared to restrict it to certain kinds of uses like emergencies and flushing the system, and mechanical difficulties that required us to have the backup system going. But apparently I was in the minority in believing that that was a restriction, because the Water Committee and the majority of the council have now given guidance that there's routine usage of the groundwater well can be mixed with our reservoir water up to 8 million gallons a month. And so that's the interpretation of the action of the council back in April, and that's the interpretation that is in effect. That will come back to the council next April in an annual report. And meanwhile, they are monitoring how much the impact of the groundwater extractions that they're doing, and making sure that the water quality is, periodically checked. And so it's in the hands of the utilities staff and our city manager. But the council was satisfied that the water committee report was adequate.
So
And
my follow-up, and I'm glad John is here to hear this, being the county has proposed this ordinance on people who sell water, who draft it out of valley floors. And I, as a resident of the Willits Little Lake Valley, I was concerned about my well and was all for the city having a backup source for emergencies because we are living in the era of droughts. But I am concerned of them now changing their mind and deciding to use this on a regular basis. And so what we're seeing is that the city decided they needed a backup source, which was fine. And then all of a sudden they decided to change their mind and they're going to use it on a regular basis, which during a drought makes me nervous when they have a pretty good reservoir system that was developed after the 77 drought. And I witnessed what went on then. And all of it was beginning, the meetings I went to, because of the algae bloom. They didn't have the ability to control the algae bloom, but technologies was brought before them and they didn't want to accept that. In any case, 2 of the 3 wells they own came up with arsenic, and they were going to use one of them because they believed the arsenic level was low enough to use, until they were threatened by one lawyer and one doctor that they would be sued if they used it. But even Jim Sullivan, who is a advisor to the state water board, has advised that if you overpump a well in the vicinity of wells who have had arsenic problems, you can break loose arsenic that has never been broken loose before, and it can become a problem if you start pulling volumes of water in a great amount. So there's a concern there that the water quality that your constituents use, John, which I'm one of, could be contaminated, or the amount could be lessened, or it could hurt our wells. So that's why I'm concerned and hope you become more involved and monitor this situation. So anyways, I'm glad that both Madge and you are in this meeting, and we're bringing this up, because especially now that you brought forward this ordinance, you and Supervisor McGortney, you brought it forward on private wells selling water, but it's also important on a city too, because at one time these other entities wanted water from Willits to ship to the coast because of this drought. And as this continues, it's going to get worse. So we've got to be very vigilant on how things are done. So I want to find out what your take, John, is, and how we can protect the people in the Little Lake Valley.
Yeah, thanks, John. And really, thank you for being a watchdog on this. You're always vigilant on these issues about water. I don't know that the county has any influence over the city and their decision. And Madge, who's on the city council, certainly they made their decision. So we'll do it. What we've been trying to do with this water ordinance is make sure, like, people who are outside of the city water district, who are drilling wells in like the Little Lake Valley or Redwood Valley or Round Valley, and then selling the water, that we need to ensure that the neighbors aren't impacted negatively by that. And so that's what this proposed ordinance will do, is make sure that the people who are going into business selling the water that gets extracted from their land but then shipped off can ensure that the neighbors won't be negatively impacted, that their water will be secure. Because that, at the end of the day, we all need the water. We all need water security.
Yes, Jennifer, you're on.
So this question is totally different from my last one. I live where I back up onto Mill Creek, and I know that they've been doing a lot of work on the streets, on the street that I live on and other streets in town. cutting down limbs that are getting close to wires and stuff like that, or where there's dead limbs so that they don't come down and cause craziness. Is there anything being done along the creek beds? I know the one I back up onto, it's Mill Creek, and it's a protected creek because it's a salmon spawning ground. And so to deal with that, you have to involve, I think it's the Department of Forestry, and I may be wrong on that. But I'm just wondering if anybody's looking at that in terms of keeping that area where there's dead branches and other stuff that could cause problems in a fire.
Is that a question for Madge? Because Mill Creek,
No,
no? Okay,
it's part of the county, so.
Yeah, it's also, it's, a lot of PG&E questions. So, but John, I hope you have a better answer than I do.
well, one of the things that with this tree mortality task force that I just convened last week is that we had 4 people from PG&E on that task force. And so, they could, because what I've contended all along is that, okay, PG&E is going to do their clearing of trees and, protecting the lines, because they say if a tree falls on the line, then starts a fire. So why don't we get together and start talking about what the best practices are? And if PG&E is going to do such and such work, then, the Fire Safe Council should be chiming in about, is that the best practice? And CAL FIRE should be in at the table. So that's kind of what the tree mortality task force is hopefully doing, getting some more cooperation. One of the things we learned from this Michael Jones, the forestry expert, was that if you leave the trees down for more than a week, then all the Ips beetles that are in those dead trees or the down trees will come up and get into a new tree and spread, and and the longer you leave them on the ground, the more they're going to spread. So PG&E heard that very loud and clear, that they're supposed to be clearing the down trees, and they haven't been, as like they say, they say we'll be out there in 8 days or something, and that doesn't happen a lot of times. And so when we hear that, hey, the Ips beetle is going to spread and we're going to have more tree mortality because of these down trees, then, we need to be working together on those kind of issues. So as far as Mill Creek, I'm not sure, Jennifer. But I do, yeah.
Yeah, I live on Mill Creek too, but I think it's really all through town and all through the whole county that PG&E has gone somewhat wild in cutting down trees with the, and I see Scott Craddy is here, maybe he can comment about this, but with this idea that it's for fire safety for the, for their lines. And if they clear underneath their lines with, I don't know how many feet on each side, and they make this huge swath, I've heard that actually is worse for spreading fires, because you've got like a wind tunnel that's cleared. Maybe it keeps the trees from falling on their line. But anyway, so if Scott, if you wanted to chime in, we would love it.
Too many issues there to unpack, but just on the riparian issue quickly, riparian areas have 3 or 4 layers of regulation that need to happen before you can do anything in them, fish and wildlife on up. And so, for what it's worth, they're going to be the last place we do anything in, because it's 3 or 4 times more expensive and takes more years to do anything there. And there are so many issues throughout the county everywhere where there are roads that are hemmed in. And, we have a list that's miles long of projects, and even attempting to delve into riparian areas is at the bottom of that because it's just so darn complex. So,
and by the way, Scott Craddy, if you didn't know, is the what are you, the general manager of the Mendocino County Fire Safe Council, which is working with all of the other fire safe councils and with the public, and has a fabulous website with wonderful information for how to fireproof and harden your house and all that stuff. So I'm sure there's more to say on this, and I see Tony Orth is ready to add his voice. Go ahead, Tony.
To chime in, yes. I just want to again thank the board for sending the letter about potential erosion issues tied to the PG&E clearance because you know we're working on the assumption that chipping out these clearances were enough to control the erosive effects of, you know, thank God we're in a drought. You didn't think I'd say that, right?
Right.
But when it comes to PG&E and their operations, thank God for the drought, because we haven't had the kind of flooding rains. And we're certainly seeing the effects of monsoonal climate change rains now throughout the country. And even here in California, I believe there were flash floods up in the Sierra yesterday. So, you know, we have to be prepared for the erosive effects of climate change. And I'm afraid fire isn't the only impact that we have to address. So, John, again, thank you. And you might comment on the letter the board sent on that issue. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. That is certainly, you know, when we see some of this clear cutting that PG&E has done in near creeks and everywhere that the power lines are, and then no mitigation for erosion, and that's very concerning. So that was part of the letter that we sent to the state Office of Emergency Services and Infrastructure to say, hey, you know, these are considerations that need to be looked at when PG&E is getting permission to do these cuts. Let's see, Scott, if Scott Craddy could, Scott, if you could just do a brief informational pitch for, you know, what information you have and, you know, your website and everything, that would be great.
Okay. Wildfire is part of life. It's part of Mendocino County. We live in a wildfire adapted environment. There needs to be a wildfire here. So like earthquakes, we live in an earthquake zone. We adapted to that decades ago. We're decades behind adapting for wildfire, and it's time to catch up. So that's, for what it's worth, why you need to support Measure P. Because if you don't, there will be a lot of sort of demoralized firefighters, for one thing. But beyond that, you know, we're not going to start to get ahead on what we need to do to begin catching up with preparing for wildfire from our homes out, from our, you know, each person developing plans, developing property, developing escape plans, and getting ready from their home outward. And I would just plug our website, which has a ton of information. It's firesafemendocino.org, and you go to prepare your home, and we've got the 6 steps for getting ready, which everyone needs to absolutely read through as soon as they can. And it starts from you. It starts with making sure you get the updates so you know what's going on around you. So getting registered for the right updates. And the next step is developing your family plan and knowing what you need to take with you and knowing what your escape routes are, so you can get out if you need to, and knowing what you need to take with you, and knowing you know, what to do to get your home ready for firefighters to be able to save it. And then it's creating defensible space so firefighters can safely actually help you. And then it is kind of a long process of developing first home hardening, because embers are the thing that are most likely to burn down your home, embers coming in from the distance. So developing a hardening around your home so it can resist embers. Next step is clearing defensible space around your home so fire can't come straight into it. And once you've done all that and you've taken care of yourself and your home and your family and property, then you help your neighbors, because for one reason, it's a little selfish, because a neighbor's home that burns down is most likely to set yours on fire. That's one of the things they found out at the Paradise Fire. Fires move through fairly quickly, but if a house catches, it's going to keep burning for long and a hot time, and endanger everyone's house around it. So it's way better if we work together and organize ourselves, and we can do two things with that. One, help our neighbors get their homes ready. And we can do a whole lot. We can do as much as a major grant if we just go out and do a little bit as a neighborhood at a time. And secondly, we can prepare for those grants. So we've got 50 odd neighborhood councils that are involved with us, all pitching in a little bit. And as they get more organized, they begin to define what needs are around them. And when they do that, we can then incorporate that into grants and bring more money into the county to bring more resources to get in better shape going forward. So if you're not part of a neighborhood council or there's not one around you, you should join one.
Well, that's great. And, you know, I attend the Fire Safe Council's meetings that Scott coordinates and is director of. And they've got a great map of all the projects that are going on in Mendocino County. And there are many, many projects. It's a map that's very full, and especially in our area, there's a lot of work going on. And like he said, you know, we have great fire safe councils. We've got the Sherwood Fire Safe Community. We've got Ridgewood, where I live, and that's a newly formed one. We've got Pine Mountain, you know, so we've got communities working together. And really, I love the approach of the Sherwood Fire Safe Council, is that it's really about building community and neighbor to neighbor connections. So,
Yeah, there's an awesome communication network there. There's Sherwood is an amazing example of how much people can do locally. They're an amazing organization. They've got their own communication network. They're landing their own grants, and they are an example of how much a empowered small group can create. For sure.
right. They're certainly pushing the envelope on what the county can do too. So
There was a comment from Will that's in the chat, and he might want to read it himself. And it on the same subject. I'm not even sure if we've covered some or all of this, but I'm just going to read it. He says, "I'm looking for an update on the PG&E vegetation management program in our area, how the cleanup and land restoration will be addressed, considering companies such as California Tree Company that are performing full-on logging without the permits required for logging. There are many areas where ditches are clogged and bare hillsides will be eroded without mitigation." So we've touched on some of that, but I just want to make sure that his comment was on the record here, and anything that we didn't talk about, the fact that some of it is using the PG&E vegetation management as an excuse to actually just do logging that should have required permits.
So, you know, for what it's worth, working with PG&E is super complicated, and we don't have great answers for that. If you go to our website, firesafemendocino.org, and look under community resources, there is a link for PG&E information. And it's the best we could put together. It's got the contact information for the people that do that. It's got the best information we could get from them about what to do if you don't want things cut, if you do want things cut, if there's a bunch of stuff left on your property after they've gone. You know, start there and work your way out. Again, I'm just going to chime in again and say, and contact us if you want to support Measure P, because the fire resources dealing with all the aftermath of all the things that are left everywhere need all the help they can get.
yeah, and Will, you know, I hope that we answered your question about what the board has done, because we've contacted the state, we've written letters saying, you know, we've got these issues that we see coming with, you know, erosion and all those kind of things that you're noting in your question. So hopefully, you know, it's like Scott was alluding to, PG&E is very difficult to work with on some levels, you know, that they kind of feel like they can do what they they need to do to protect their lines.
Okay, and I'm very glad that KMUD is covering this, and we're also recording it to be broadcast from Channel 3 here in Willits. And I just want to again mention that Willits Economic Localization is sponsoring this, and we could use your support because we're a very small volunteer-run organization. I'm just putting in how to join or donate to in the chat again in case you want to help us out. And we're sponsoring not only a whole series of town halls with John Haschak, but we also had earlier this year a forum on fire preparedness and had guests like Scott Craddy and Keith Rutledge and others to talk about all of those issues. And we're going to be having one coming up about electricity, how you can save money and save climate change by reducing your fossil fuel use. So that'll be September 22nd. We're going to have a forum on that. And we may have another candidates forum in advance of the November election, depending on how many seats are being contested locally, because we tend to focus on the northern inland county area. We are at 8 o'clock, and if anyone has any questions that haven't been touched on yet, we still have an opportunity to do that.
And Madge, why don't you talk about, the local city council, the Willits City Council.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe Tony could talk about brook trails.
All right.
And Jennifer could talk about the school board.
School board. Well, the deadline for candidates interested in any of those positions is August 12th. So it's 8 days away. If you are interested in being a candidate, you need to either, if it's for the city council, you can get that packet of information at City Hall from the city clerk. If it's for the other positions, you need to go to the registrar of voters at the county. Might be able to get it by just phoning them. But anyway, you only have 8 more days to decide. If there is an incumbent who does not run for re-election, that deadline is extended by 5 days. So for the city of Willits, there are two of the 5 seats are up for re-election, and those are the seats currently held by Greta Connie and Larry Stransky. And I'm pretty sure Larry Stransky is planning to run. I do not know whether Greta is planning to run again or not. So there's an opportunity there. There might be a vacancy or there might not be. Tony, do you have any information about the Brook Trails Board?
Well, I signed up again to run one last time. I started this journey in 1984. So I believe I might be the longest serving elected in the county at this point, but I'm always waiting for someone to challenge that because who knows for sure. But I was the last incumbent of the 3 seats that were up. So that means that closing of the open period for filing for the Brook Trails Township will end on the 12th. It will not be extended. And I found that out because I was the last one to resign of the 3 incumbents. But Brook Trails news is couple of things is we did get a state grant for our parks, and we're going to be restoring the park horse with some of those funds and hopefully some other things. I can tell you the Brook Trails golf course, the disc golf course, which has come around at the right time because it's almost doubled the revenue to the operators, which is very welcomed. The disc golf course was rated number 6 in the state out of many thousands in the nation. They were rated 106. So it's people like the Redwoods. People like to come to Brook Trails and throw their discs. We've had quite a few tournaments. Hopefully, eventually we'll have ESPN on site for one of those tournaments. Who knows? So that's exciting. Also, we got a state grant to put a second clarifier in. This is very critical to our operations of our water system. When you only have one clarifier, anything goes wrong with it, especially in a drought, it can cause serious problems because you have to meet the metrics of providing safe water to all our water users. So we're excited about that. It's been almost 15 years we've attempted to get that. And with the state surplus, we're seeing more funds being made available for those kind, and the drought, of course. We're also, that ties into another project we've gotten grants for, where we're looking very seriously at going to full treatment of our clean sewage flow, because as you know, Brook Trails is mostly all residential with no commercial operations that can cause issues. But we would actually treat that and then mix it into our reservoir above our water plant during the dry periods to extend and increase our water supply here in Brook Trails. We're doing very well, having raised Lake Emily 3 feet. Some years ago, it cost about $3 million because we also earthquake proofed or earthquake resisted our dam structure on Willits Creek. And that was about 1/3 the total cost of that project. But it's a new modern structure. And so we're doing very well through the droughts. We do have a water cap in place that we can reduce if necessary, but even last year when we got about 20 inches less of rainfall than we did this year, we did not have to increase the restrictions. We do monitor about 25 water users who tend to use over the allowance, and you know, as things dry up, we certainly like to look to enforcement to keep that cap enforceable. And that's my news from Brook Trails.
Thank you.
All right.
We should
And
always,
we'll go to Jennifer. Jennifer Suckney. You want to tell us what's happening with the school district board?
Well, I'm going to be running for school district board. It's the first time. I'm not sure how many seats are open. I know somebody else is also interested in running for it. And I'm going to get my paperwork in on time. So that's what I can say. The experience that I have is I taught bilingual 3rd and 4th grade 1 year each a long time ago. And then I've worked within communities every year since then. I've worked with both within the English-speaking communities, Spanish-speaking communities, LGBT communities. So it's something that hopefully we'll see what happens, but I'm looking forward to if it's positive.
is this your first campaign speech?
Yes, it is.
Great. Okay.
I just want to thank you, Madge, for
Off to
setting
dinner.
this up. You know, Madge has been doing these all along for the last few years, and it's a great service to the community, I think. And you know, when someone else like Madge takes over and does logistics and the publicity and everything for that, it's a lot of work. And so she's been dealing with, you know, this 5-day-old grandson. And so it's really appreciated.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that John's been so willing to do this, because not all supervisors are this open to hearing, you know, the questions and the complaints and trying to stay on top of it. And John's been consistently doing that. So,
Well, and hopefully next time we'll be live and in person. But,
yeah, we're
you know, I
looking
think
at doing that.
people also enjoy doing this from the comfort of your home, right? Too. So.
All right, it sounds like we are ready to wrap it up. So thank you all for attending. I hope you learned something. And so,
if anyone has any questions that you that come up in the middle of the night or whatever, just it's haschakj@mendocinocounty.org, haschakj@mendocinocounty.org, or my phone number is 707-972-4214.
great.
Thanks everyone for attending.
And thank KMUD for recording this also, and for Channel 3 that will have it up as well. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.